Thank you, James. I think that set the scene very well, the sort of wider context of this work. We've been doing this for a while, and I want to start off by making some acknowledgements. I think this has not been easy. There's been all sorts of difficult things about it, the politics, the understanding the wider context, the data, the statistics, working with the membership, keeping things communicated. And it didn't work without having some pretty clear vision on it and teamwork. The sort of teamwork that I think we've seen in the society is exactly the kind of teamwork that we didn't see from the England rugby team in Cardiff on Saturday. For the Celts among you, you smile at yourselves. But anyway, so I think that the work that James has done on this for a long time has been really quite remarkable, because it's not an easy thing. You don't win a lot of friends in doing this kind of stuff, and I think he's been very focused on what he's done. And also I'd like to say a word about Graham Cooper as well, because he's been the secretary for this for the last 5 years, and now he's no longer the secretary. But I think the conversations that we've had about this and the meetings that we've had and the sort of clarity of purpose that we've tried to achieve to bring this off has not been easy, and I think Graham's done an amazing job for that. I'd also like to acknowledge Heart Research UK. We were very, very fortunate to get a significant grant from them a couple of years ago, and that has enabled us to take this from what was basically amateur hour into a much more professional standing, and we advertised for an analyst from that grant money. And we were incredibly fortunate to appoint Graham Hickey, who's going to say some things later. So we went from being doing our best, if you like, to having proper professional support, both about the statistics, but also about the IT management. And I know quite a lot of analysts and statisticians, but I've never met one who has a feel for the sort of surgical side of things in the way that Graham does, and that's been essential in terms of taking this forward. We couldn't really do any of this stuff until we cleaned the data, and that required many, many hours of going through fine print of the data set and stuff. And Stuart Grant, who's also going to be saying a few words, who works with me in Manchester, has spent many, many hours on that. And without these things, we couldn't have taken it anywhere. We also managed to get this stuff funded up by HQIP. So HQIP provide the funding for the whole programme. And off the back of that, we appointed Becca Cosgriff, who's sitting over there, who's now the SCTS project manager. And again, she's been very clear, and those of you who have dealings about communicating with in terms of validating the data will have seen the clarity she brings to that kind of stuff. So what we've now got is a good team with different skill sets, which is good, and hopefully is making this exciting and sustainable, which is important. So the things that we've been doing is we've been trying to clean and continue to refine the database. We've got the governance issues that we've been doing and the publication that we do and the letters that go out. And we've also been working hard on developing a suite of tools to sort of promote greater transparency from this database. And also we're sitting on 450,000 records with long-term mortality tracking, which is pretty unique in the world. And so we have an obligation, I think, to ask questions of that data set, to test hypotheses which are clinically relevant. And also what will be exciting, and I'll say a little bit more about it later, is how we can link that into other data sets and link to GP data sets or biobanks or genomic data sets and things like that to get a greater understanding of the disease processes which we treat. Graham's got a slide about data cleaning, which has got about 25 boxes. This is my simple slide about data cleaning, but basically you have an extract from the CCAD data set, and to make that useful, you have to do a whole bunch of things. You need to clarify any duplicates. Say somebody has an operation, the consultant puts it on, and then 2 hours later the registrar puts it on, and they put it on slightly different times and maybe have slightly different fields. Is that the same patient? Is it a different patient? That's surprisingly complicated to work out, but we've got rules for that. How we clean all the variables to consistent synonyms, how we actually define what is an aortic valve replacement is a little bit more difficult than you might think. Then we map procedures to spells. So if you have a coronary artery operation on Monday and a dissection on the Tuesday and you die on the Wednesday, have you died of the dissection or the coronary artery operation? We have rules about that. And you have to do all those things before you can then get on and actually make any sense of all this kind of stuff. So the current aims that we have on this is that this should be professionally led. We think as cardiac surgeons we are the people who understand the process, therefore we are the people who should be leading that process, because otherwise it will go wrong. It can go wrong when we lead it, at least, but we're doing it from a position of information. It should be on validated data. I think if people don't trust the data, it has no place at all. It needs to have robust risk adjustment, because we see benefits from the transparency, but actually if all you're doing is encouraging people to turn down the high-risk patients because they're worried about the results, there's a problem with the programme. So risk adjustments are fundamentally important. The data needs to be up to date, and that's been a bit of our Achilles heel, but we're working forward on that one. And nowadays, we used to write these big blue books, but actually in the connected era, when you've got half the people on here will be connected to something through the Wi-Fi and stuff, we need to be using new tools for that. And all those tools need to be fit for purpose, and we need to be clear that they are. We will develop some things which will be useful, we will develop some things which will be useless, but what we need to do is understand that and learn from that and build that back into the things that we refine and the further things that we develop. And also, I think what we're clear about is this data is not just for surgeons, it's for a whole bunch of different stakeholders, commissioners, patients, and we need to ensure that the tools that we've got are facing the right way for the various people who are looking at this stuff. So this is the kind of suite of tools that we've got at the moment, or developing at the moment. The Outcomes website, which you will have seen, which James showed, the Blue Book Online. I'm just going to see if that works on my link here. Sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you're not. Okay, so the way that this is basically a filter which is stuck on front of the whole data set, which enables sort of various questions to be asked. So 90% of everything in the last Blue Book is available on this website. So if you want to know how many bypass operations are done at Bristol Royal Infirmary, you can type it in there, and there it is. So that's all available, and that's available freely through the SCTS website from this morning. What are the actual outcomes of the operation? This isn't down granular to individual hospitals. This is just pooled national data. But if you want to know what is the mortality rate over time, it's shown there, and you can filter on all those various different operative groups to get the data out there. And the idea is that as the data comes in, this will be refreshed quarterly, so we'll always be looking at the most up-to-date data that we have. In terms of expected outcomes of the operations, again, this is just using the logistic Euroscore at the moment, but we can change that by just tweaking the code as appropriate. So if you want to know what the predicted risk of aortic valve replacement is over time, it's shown there going up year on year. I think we all know that from our clinical practice, but that's the data as shown there. In terms of risk factors, we got all the risk factors, which was a huge amount of the data in the Blue Book. So if we're interested, say, in risk factors for isolated CABG, they're all shown there in terms of a tabular format and a graphical format. So again, this is all available now. We've also got the long-term mortality data in there. So in terms of looking at long-term survival curves, we've got it there. You can filter it in slightly different ways. So that's long-term survival filtered by operative urgency. So we hope people will find that useful. There was a huge amount of work done by Graham and Stuart cleaning the data up, otherwise we couldn't have done this. And then what we've done is we've worked with a group called Northwest eHealth at Manchester University to put this together. So that's all available now, and I hope people will find that useful. Slideshow from current slide. Okay, so the next thing that we've done, and this in my view, we should have had available to everybody all along, and we haven't. And that's been my biggest disappointment, I suppose, that I couldn't make this happen earlier. But now we've produced these web-based tools to enable people to monitor their practice as they go. And this is web-based. People will be able to get the raw data back, the risk-adjusted data, and that we will manage access to that because we're having that available to professionals. And I'll show you how you do that. And Becca will be responsible for managing that process through NICOR. So we'll have different levels of access. We'll have a standard surgeon account where a surgeon can go on and look at their practice. We'll have a hospital audit lead account where somebody can go on and look at all the surgeons in their hospital. And actually, if you as a hospital decide you all want to have that level of access, you can do that. And then there will be a sort of super user account to enable people to have a look at the whole shooting match should they so wish. So here we go. Okay, so this is the way it works. You have a username. And you have a password. Okay, so I don't know how well you can see that, but you can look at it for one of your hospitals or for an individual surgeon. So at the moment, the only hospital I've given myself access to is University Hospital South Manchester, and I can choose my time window. So say, for example, I look at the 1st of April 2007 to the end of 2011, quarter 4 2011, and I choose my operative group. So there's options there, but we'll go for all cardiac surgery, and I submit that. That should give me my report here. So that's the kind of crude data, sort of in headline figures there in the web browser. And then if you download the report, what it gives you is a PDF which you can then use for slides or print out or whatever else, which again summarizes the period of time that you've got there. It gives you all the statistics, the number of cases, the accrued mortality, the risk-adjusted mortality, the mean length of stay, and we can put in 1 year survival and stuff. We've just got an issue with data protection around that at the moment. It then gives you your funnel plot according to the sort of up-to-date risk adjustment models that we use, with the confidence intervals in there. So that was a crude mortality plot, the top one, and then a risk-adjusted mortality plot down the bottom there. A sort of Q-sum curve and a VLAD plot. And again, this now works. It doesn't work on all the web browsers, which we need to do a bit more work on, and we need to manage these access accounts to people, and we need to have a discussion probably through the database managers meeting as well this afternoon, because I think the database managers will find this a useful thing as well. So that's coming out in the next month or so. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to show is this thing we've been working on, which is a lookup app, again, to make this data more available. So this is being developed as an iPhone, iPad, and web app, and it works on data, which is a sort of a crushing up of the existing data. So it's not all the patient-level data. It's a sort of a subsection of that data, which enables us to do what was required on that. And it gives us the ability to filter on a phone the data on the basis of procedure and risk factor data. And it can give you multiple outcomes of interest, because anything that's in the data set you can actually spit out in terms of answer on the app. This is being built at the moment. We've found a very good group to do this with, and we're hoping this will be released by the end of April if we can jump through all the hoops we need to jump through on that. So the idea is you'll get a screen, something like this, and you can choose the operative group that you're interested in. There's different options for that. You have to select a group to go forwards. And then as you filter down the data set by picking up these various different things, it'll give you a different number. So you'll start off with 250,000 records. You'll click cabbage and it will say there's 150,000 records. You'll click female and it'll go down to 80,000 records. You'll click poor ventricular function, it'll go to 15,000 records, and so on. So you can filter on the various variables in the data set. And we're giving options to choose age is sort of in five-year periods. Somehow we haven't quite worked through exactly how that will look. And then when you filter down to the level that you want and you've got a number you're happy with, what it will do is it'll give you the number of patients in that group, and it will also give you the in-hospital mortality. What I put on here, and I was trying to catch Sam this morning, I wanted to speak to him, I saw him at breakfast, but then I didn't manage to talk to him about that before this meeting. But we think it would be interesting to put this sort of filtering stuff alongside sort of more classic logistic regression risk prediction models, because we think that gives maximal information to people to enable them to communicate with patients. And we think this kind of approach has some advantages in that it's always contemporaneous, because it's always looking at the most recent data. And we also think it has some advantages that it gives you some certainty about your prediction. If there's 20,000 patients in a particular group, you can be very certain about your prediction. If there's 50, you can be much less certain. So we think this sits alongside those other risk factors. But I do want to speak to Sam and his Euroscore colleagues to see how they see that stuff fitting together, so if we can find a sensible way forward on that. So at the moment we've got length of stay on there, but we also want to put on 1 year survival on there. And we hope this will be useful for patients, and we'll make sure the help pages are all right for that. For decision support for MDTs, the heart team, and outpatient settings. We get quite a lot of queries. How many people over the age of 80 had an aortic valve replacement, which Graham runs for people, but we think it's great if we make that available so people can do it themselves in real time. And other people like the valve industry and stuff, I think, will be interested in this as well. So the plan is that will be downloadable from the App Store, all being well, by the end of April, and we plan just to do that for free for everybody. So the other thing we've been looking at is that almost everything that we're doing now, we started off, and then by the time we finish it, we find actually we would do it a different way if we were starting today, because this world is moving very, very fast. And this is, again, where I'm absolutely indebted to Graham and his understanding of these issues and his thinking on these issues. So what he has done, and he tells me it was easy, is that he has stuck open source Google Charts in front of the code that he's written in a program called Google Viz, which enables us to do some interesting things. So this is the way it works. So this is sort of web available, and there's a series of things you can look at. So that's risk-adjusted mortality on the y-axis, risk-adjusted mortality rates, and you can choose your hospital. So this is with Insure, And again, you can then play this to see how your risk-adjusted mortality compares over time. So those are all the other hospitals in the country, and that's our risk-adjusted mortality. So you get a real good idea about biological variation. Things do go up and down, but what you can see is some hospitals sort of popping out the top and going a bit orange or red, and that's where maybe the concern, and we hope that this will help people to pick up their things at an earlier stage. So you can look at this in different ways, and this is just, tagging your mortality as a hospital, see how that changes compared to the pack over time. And that's one way of looking at it. We've also got length of stay in there, which I found very interesting for our hospital, because our length of stay is longer than I'm comfortable with, and we need to do some more work around that. And the other thing you can do, if you so wish, is have a different format for the way you present this. So this is sort of as a bar chart in a sort of league table type thing. And you can see again, how things go up and down. So we haven't worked out exactly how we're going to implement this, but what we want to do is have sort of access rights in the same way that we're going for the governance toolkit. So this either through the SCTS website or through the eLab, just to make this available to people to help with them sort of monitoring themselves. So. So the final thing I want to talk about is a blue book for patients. So historically, we've written these big blue books for professionals, but we think, with the recommendations of Francis and the way we've been going on this with transparency, we've now configured a blue book which is purely patient-facing. And we've taken the data we think will be of interest for them in that. So this is pretty much written. We've got a little bit of tweaking to do. We need to get it published, and we hope to get that out over the next 6 weeks also. Activity and national trend outcomes data, it will point to the other tools that we've got out there. We give them some thoughts about how we are using this for professional regulation, and we've also done some exploration of patient experience measurement to sit alongside the clinical outcomes measurement, which we've done in conjunction with PICA. So finally, we're also now trying to develop some sort of academic momentum around this, and thanks very much to some of the people in the room who've helped us on this in terms of turning these analyses that we do into sort of coherent manuscripts. So some of them are getting published, and we're getting them into reasonable journals, which I'm pleased about. Obviously, database research is different from trials. There's holes in the data. If you were developing a data set to ask a particular question, you might have a different one from the one you've actually got. But we're getting them into reasonable journals, and we're trying to sort of accelerate that. I'll say a little bit more about that later. So as James described so clearly, we have gone from a place where professionals were guarding their data closely to a much more open and transparent culture. We're trying to produce these suite of products, and what we need after we release this is feedback from people about what they like about them and what they don't like about them, and so we can actually refine them and make them fit for the purposes that people have. I think what's important is we are doing this stuff because we've got a data set and we've been doing it for a while, but some of these things will be useful and can be cascadable sideways, and we need to make sure that happens. And as James has described, these external factors will drive the process further, not necessarily with us, but with all other specialties. Thank you very much.